Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So for today's little tutorial I thought we'd make some beautiful leaf jewellery. Whether it's a brooch or pin, a pendant or some earrings. Now I was inspired by this idea by some wonderful photos I've seen doing the rounds on places like Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, where people have decorated real leaves. And I looked at them and thought, well actually we could have a bit of fun with that and do something similar with polymer clay. So this is the idea I've come up with, nice and simple, just variations of colour with some stripes and some dots, and then we've used a texture to create a real leaf sort of vein, and I've just added some wire to make it look like the stem of the leaf. I've gone for sort of spring summery type colours for this year, but obviously you can do them in whatever colour variation you want to, and I'll show you some different colour variations that I've done at the end of this tutorial. This is a very easy technique to do using simple colours of clay, and at every step you can follow what I can do, or you can simplify it or miss out what I'm doing. It's completely up to you how you do each bit. So I'll do a quick intro with the equipment, the things you need to know regarding the textures and the shapes we're going to use to cut around, but other than that we'll move straight into technique and have some fun making some beautiful leaf jewellery. The equipment we're using is fairly basic and straightforward. I use a polymer clay blade, a roller, a craft knife and something like this cable needle just to sort of smooth between joins when we add layers of clay together. I use a little bit of liquid polymer clay. This is actually just decanted down into a small bottle. For what we're doing today, PVA glue could be used, but liquid clay or bacon bond, something like that, would be much better. We create a template for our leaf shapes, so you just need some card, some scissors and a pencil. When I'm working, I find it easier to work on something like a laminated sheet, and this is simply the back of what I normally use, which is the www.printablepaper.net, because I laminate and use this. You don't need a measuring sheet, but having something like a piece to work on is quite handy, and I will also put some of my clay onto smaller sheets, something like baking parchment or baking paper, wax paper, tracing paper, something like that would work well. To create the stalks for our leaves, I'm using aluminium wire, and this is 1mm wire because I find it nice and easy to bend, and also it's not going to snag as much on clothes or things like that when you're wearing the brooches or the necklaces, and if you do catch it, it bends easily and isn't going to cause any harm. And I've just chosen colours that match with the pieces depending on which colour I put towards the stalk end of our leaf. Because we're using wire, I've got wire cutters and some round nosed pliers. If you're creating a pin or a brooch, then I've just got one of the safety pin backs, and again use whatever size you need for the piece you are creating. If you're making earrings, I've used 0.8mm jewellery wire, and I'll check the gauge and put that in the details below the video for you. You only need a couple of inches per earring, and then I've got some of the earring findings, just the ordinary fishhook ones, and some little glass beads which have got biggish holes in, enough to poke the wire through, and I'll show you how we do that at the end. I like to add a little detail on the edges and the inside to highlight the vein detail of my leaves. The Pebeo paints work very well with polymer clay that I have found, and just a small brush. And when using the paint and using things like paint, obviously our hands will get very messy, so I do use biodegradable wet wipes or wet cloths just to clean my hands and my work as I go along. When I'm baking, I've just got little torn off pieces of card that I've simply created curves in, so it adds a little bit of stability. We can put our pieces on when they bake, and when I do bake I always tent in aluminium foil just to protect the clay should your oven spike in temperature suddenly during the baking process. I use a little bit of sandpaper, so 180 grit, something like that, and this is the wet dry sandpaper, and just to sand the very end of the metal for the stem of the leaf, just to make sure it's not sharp in any way, and I do that right at the end just before I curl it. Other than that, I use a pasta machine dedicated to polymer clay use, and if you don't have a pasta machine, then you can simply stack layers of playing cards either side of your clay, roll over the top, and that will give you the thickness. And again, all the details of the thicknesses that you need I will put in the detailed description below the video. So I'll just talk you quickly through the textures you can use. There are loads of different leaf moulds available to buy. You can buy them at good craft shops, online, anything like that. So you can get these type, which are the 2-part ones where you can put your piece in between, come in different sizes, different shapes. They're all very good. You can get some flatter ones which just have the one side piece. Those are actually from Katie Sue. They're very good. You can get flat plastic ones like these. These, because they're not very flexible, I don't find as easy to use, and you definitely need some form of releasing agent or something like this, something like cornstarch, corn flour. Ones like these and handmade ones and these ones, you don't tend to need a releasing agent on when using polymer clay, but if you find your clay does stick at all, then using something like that, corn flour, cornstarch, will work really well. I normally use texture sheets that I've made myself, and I normally use the Pebeo Silly Gum when I'm making something like that. It comes in the 2 containers, so 2 parts you mix together, and then you get a real leaf. Simply spread it out over the leaf. You can see there where I've gone over the top, and I will get generally 2 leaves. You can tell this is actually from 2 different species, but that doesn't matter. Just to give you an example of how it comes out. And I like using the big leaves because then I can use these even for smaller pieces, because you just put the smaller pieces right up towards the top and it gives you a nice texture. So get 2 leaves, one do the front of the leaf, one do the back of the leaf. So you've got the inward spine and then the outer poking spine as it goes down the leaf. And then you can sandwich your clay between the 2 layers and you get a lovely texture. So I'll be using those in what we're doing today, but I'll also be using just a little piece of a sponge, and this is sort of the packing sponge you get, and again it gives a nice texture on the back of pieces, and you can use that as an alternative. So just choose whatever type of texture you want, and we can now move on to starting the project, and we'll start by making our templates for those leaves. We'll start by going through the template we're going to use, and I've always found it easier, if you can, to find a real leaf. This is an ivy leaf that I picked a couple of days ago. It was a bush that was growing wild and was going to be got rid of at some stage soon, so I didn't feel too bad about picking a single leaf off of it. And I just liked the shape of it, and I thought it would make a nice pleasing shape. So obviously you can just create your own template, but if you do have access to a leaf that's a nice shape, choose that. So I just drew around it and cut out myself a card template. And then in order to make life easy for ourselves, we're going to do 3 different templates. So all I've done is I've just drawn around this 3 times. If you're doing a brooch or a pin, then you need the 3rd one. If you're only doing earrings or a pendant, then you only need the 2. The first one we're just going to use as a template as it is. So of course, because I already had this one, I didn't need to do that, but to show you I've done all 3. The second one we're going to use to create our pattern within the leaf, so the sections and different colours. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a squiggly line, probably something like that. And if you do it, mark them, and mark them in such a way that the numbers, you can read them easily and you know which way are they up. So for instance, the 1, I've done it like that rather than just a straight line so that I know which way is up. So I will then cut out these 3 separate portions. For the pin, if we're going to do a brooch or a pin, I will take my pin or brooch finding and I will place that on top of the 3rd piece, so I know roughly the size of the cutout that I need to take. And I will also mark myself where the leaf stem would go with a piece of wire going in. So I know that's the area I need to cover for the back of my brooch or pin, and I'm going to show you a way to incorporate this so it's almost seamless on the back, and that's one of the tips I'm going to give you. And of course you can use this technique for things other than the brooch or the pin. We're going to have a different technique for the earrings and another different one for the pendant on the back, and I'll show you how we're going to do those, but this is the way we're going to do the brooch or the pin. And the only bit I need to cut out of this is that area now, because I know that's the area and size I want when we get to do the back of the brooch or the pin. So I will get those cut out, and then we'll move on to the clay we're going to use for today's session. The clay I'm using today is Cernit, because it gives me a lovely, flexible and unbreakable finish for the pieces we want, which means I can keep them nice and thin. However, all the well-known and recognised brands of polymer clay will also work for this technique. The amounts I've got are relatively small, and I'm going to do a skinner blend of these three colours and pearl. But if you don't want to do that, if you just want to do the plain colours, then just do double the amounts of these colours and don't do the skinner blend. So I've got English pink, lime green, turquoise, pearl, 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 a little bit more pearl and some gold. And all of these amounts are 7 grams or 1/4 ounce of clay, and these amounts are 3.5 grams or 1/8 ounce of clay. So I'll get all of these colours conditioned separately in their separate colours and make them into sheets, and I will put them through a medium setting of my pasta machine. And on my pasta machine, 0 is thick and 9 is thin. If you're unsure how or why we condition polymer clay, I do have a video on that, and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one for you, so you can go and have a look. So I'll get all that done and bring you back, and then we'll do a skinner blend with those two colours, and then once we've done that, we're going to repeat for those two and then for those two, so we end up with 3 skinner blends. I've conditioned my 2 pieces of clay, as I said, put them through on setting 3, so a medium setting of my pasta machine, and I've made them into fairly longish rectangles because we want quite a narrow skinner blend. So I'm going to do the normal, just cut diagonally down through, pick the 2 pieces up, push them together, give them a little roll, fold in half and put back through my pasta machine on a thicker setting, because I've now got 4 layers of clay. So for me that would be setting number 2. And when I'm putting it through the pasta machine, I don't want it to go much wider than that, so I will always push it right up to one edge of the pasta machine. Or if you want to, you can just put pieces next to your rollers so they sort of sit in. Even a pack of clay works, just to limit the amount of space that has to go through the pasta machine. I take my little block of polymer clay, and this is what I mean when I say I put it right up next to the side of the pasta machine. So I've got it on a thicker setting, setting number 2, and as it goes through, I just push my thumb to push it through. Now I'm not going anywhere near the rollers, so my thumb is up and above that, but then collect it, put it top to bottom. As always, turn it the other way around. So those of you who've seen my tutorial on skinner blends know, if you've got bits that fall off, just stick them back on, that's absolutely fine. And that's a tip that comes from Sarah Shriver. But all I'm doing is I'm just literally with my fingers just making sure it doesn't get too wide, and by doing that you can keep going backwards and forwards until you get a nice blend coming through, and you can stop your clay from going too wide. And once you've got it to the blend and the thickness you want, then we'll simply take it down to setting number 3, so a medium setting, and that's one of our blends done. As mentioned, I did exactly the same with the green and with the turquoise, so I've ended up with my nice blends of the 3 colours. And I just think it adds a little something having the blend and the differentiation in colour and that ombre shade as it goes through. However, if you don't have that, you don't have a pasta machine, don't want to do that, just simply do the plain colours. So I've got my little template here of the leaf, which we'd cut into our 3 sections. But the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is just take off a slice of all 3 of our pieces, and I'll bring you back to those in just a moment. Having done that, I need to decide which colour I'm going to do and where. So I think we'll do the turquoise being the top, then we'll have the peach in the middle, and then we'll go down to having the green at the bottom. And as you can see, we're going to have enough to do certainly a brooch and a pendant and at least 1 pair of earrings from the amount of clay that we have. So all I'm going to do is cut out round those 3 pieces. You've probably noticed that I was working on a laminated sheet, so it just means I can work and move this around and have space to work on at the same time. If you don't have a laminated sheet, then a piece of greaseproof parchment, baking paper, something like that would work equally well. So I've put our 3 pieces roughly back together, and just where they join, very gently, not pushing down, I'm just going to roll over the edges just to get them all just to join up nicely on this side. We will repeat the same on the back in just a moment. So I've got that nice leaf shape back, and now we can start adding the decoration. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to get those 3 pieces of the cut-offs that we did a moment ago, and I'm going to put them all through the thinnest setting of my pasta machine to get myself long thin strips. If you're not using a pasta machine, simply roll them by hand as thin as you can get them, and then proceed in the same way as I'm going to do in just a moment. So these 3, as I said, I put through my thinnest setting, setting number 9 on my pasta machine, and I took the bit of gold clay we've had, conditioned that up, and put it through a thinnish setting, so setting number 7 on my pasta machine. And then we're simply going to roll one of these colours into the next to create ourselves a little bullseye cane, which we can create some added detail on into our leaf in a moment. And I'm going to do the peachy pink on the inside, so all I'm doing is simply rolling it up. Not worried if it's a bit messy at the start, it'll all come out because we're going to make this so small. But do it all the way down till it gets to the white end, or the pearl end, and then I'm going to add it onto the green, but again on the pearl end. Just rolling it nice and tight so there's no air bubbles, and when I've got to the end of the green, I'm going to go down onto this turquoise. And that creates a nice little bullseye cane. We're just going to roll the whole piece just in a layer of that gold. So I'm going to push that in slightly to make it more even. And then we're just going to wrap that in one layer of the gold. Cut off where you see the crossover line. And that will give us our bullseye cane, and the rest of the gold I'm going to put back into a strip and put through to my thinnest setting of the pasta machine, and I'll do exactly the same with the little extra bit of pearl clay that we had left over as well. So with this, we don't need it very big. This is more than enough, so we're going to reduce this down. So to start with, I'm just pressing in with my fingers just to get the clay moving. And then once we get it going, we can give it a roll. Again, this is much more than you need to do the amounts that we're doing. So I'm just going to take one part, put the other on one side for use later on. And I'm going for 2 sizes, one slightly larger. But I don't want them too big because I don't want it to sort of take over the leaf. These are just going to sort of be little additional details. So one probably about that size. And then one we're going to do really small. So again, I'm just going to take a small piece. That can go on one side for later. And all I'm doing is I'm just rolling with my fingers and spreading them as I go. So we end up with a nice, thin, small piece. So those are the 2 different sizes we're going to have for our additional dots we're going to add onto our design. And we'll start our design by adding some of the gold and some of the pearl colour as a decoration. Now I've used pearl rather than white because it just gives a little bit of a shimmer onto our leaf when we're working. And for those of you who've worked with polymer clay with the mica powders in, you know we get that lovely sort of shifting colour when we roll it and create different sort of shapes. And again, we'll get that coming out in the additional bits we add on top of the leaves. So the first thing I'm going to do is work with the gold, and both of these I've just put on a piece of baking parchment just to make it easier when I'm working, and I'm going to create a non-straight line. So for anyone with slightly wobbly hands or shaky hands, this is going to be perfect because I'm not looking for something that's even. Put those pieces on one side for later, and I want a thinnish band, but as I say, not an even one. So we'll do something like that, pull that off, and then we're simply going to lay that where those 2 colours meet. Don't worry about going over the edges, we'll sort that out later. Don't worry if, like me, it breaks in half because you just simply patch it back on and pull it round until you get a piece that's going to cover up where the gap was. And the less, sort of the more untidy or the less even it looks, the better, so really don't worry about it. Do another one where the next join is between the colours. You see, I'm just sort of folding it as I go as well, just to give extra difference in the sort of widths and stuff. And that's our main bit, and then we're going to take our pearl clay. So for this one, I'm going to start off by giving myself a straight edge, and then I'm going to use the blade and cut myself as thin a strip as I can. So press down and sort of flick away, and it should sit on the end of your blade. You can then pull it off, and we're just going to weave this next to and just above that gold strip, just adding a little bit of interest. There's no right or wrong for this, and each time you can do it slightly different. So I'm going to put one above, one below, one above and one below. And then for the last bit of decoration, I was going to take a couple of slices of the larger, round, more slices of the smaller one, and just add them on wherever I think they're needed. So we'll end up with something that looks a bit like that, and then with our roller, we're simply just going to roll those shapes gently into the background. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing almost rather than rolling. I just want them to fit back into the background without distorting the shape too much. So that's the front of our piece finished, and then because we want a nice professional look, we're going to turn him over, and we're going to do exactly the same process on the other side, starting with making sure those gaps are nicely joined, and then adding the gold, then the white, and then the little cut-out details. And I'll bring you back when I've got that done. And when it comes to decorating the back, I've just added that little cut-out we had, which shows the brooch backing and the wire in place, so that I know there's no point decorating or adding any decorative bits underneath that for the little dots. However, I have still done the gold and the white bands, and that'll make sense once we finish baking this and we add the backing on later. Having done both sides, I'm going to turn him back to the right side, find my template, put that back on, because it will probably have gone slightly out of shape by now, and then just cut around again just to neaten the shape up before we create the texture. Keep all the offcuts on one side because we will need those later. So I'm going to use my leaf texture sheet, and because I'm only wanting a smaller piece than the leaf there, I'm going to work right from up this end, and I'm going to put the corner there onto where the line would be, and that is, I know, where I want my line to come out, because that's where I've got the little sort of imprint in. So I'm just going to very gently with my fingers press him down. With this particular template, I don't need to put any releasing agent on. If it's another form, you might need to put some cornstarch or corn flour on. So have a practice with some scrap clay first, and then I'm just going to press down using this texture sheet just to give a nice texture on the back that we can replicate when we add our additional backing on afterwards with the brooch pin in. And have a nice leaf texture, and then I can add a little bit of a curl and maybe sort of curl that up and around a bit, maybe add a little bit of something onto these outer leaves, but making sure the main part of the brooch or pin back stays flat, because we need somewhere for the brooch or the pin to sit. I've got a couple of strips of card which I've just folded up with my fingers to create a bit of a curve so that we can sit our piece on there, just to give it a little bit of shaping. So I'll add my piece onto the tile, and as always tent the whole piece in aluminium foil to protect the clay should my oven spike during the baking curing process, and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And I'll bring you back when that piece is baked and cooled. When our brooch piece has finished baking, we need to create, if we can, a fairly seamless or invisible piece on the back. So for that we're going to need more colours of the blue, the pink and the green. So if your pieces aren't enough, we haven't got enough left because you've created other pieces, because I've already taken the amount for the pendant and the earrings out of here, simply push your pieces back up into a smaller piece, put it back through the pasta machine that way first, and carry on folding top to bottom till you end up with another nice smooth skinner blend, and then we've got enough to take our pieces to create the back from the brooch. I've taken our piece of card that we've got our markings out as to where we're going to put our pieces in, turn it so it's the right way round so you can see where it should fit in with that little groove on the top, and with a pencil I've just marked roughly where the gold bands go, so I know the size of the pieces to fit in. So we now know that the top piece is going to be dark blue, so I can put this on here, because it doesn't have to be exactly the same apart from the points where it comes out. So I'm going to put that like that. Then I can take the card off, and whilst that's still in place, use those points just to give myself a wiggly line. So we know the next piece down needs to be peach, so I can now put that piece somewhere like that, put that piece over it like that, cut around the outside, and then if we do the same as we did before, so lines out here and here. I know that's the next piece to go on. And then the very last piece, we can cut around, put that piece in place, and we know that if we cut round there, we will have a piece that we can put all three pieces of all three colours together, and it will fit in and match more or less with that piece there. So we now need to just smush these together as we did with the other pieces, both front and back. Again, don't worry if you've got any little dots or marks, because we can always add a little coloured dot in to disguise that. Get your brooch or pin finding, put that in so that it fits, and I'm just going to cut out the rectangle and rough shape of where that brooch pin is going to fit. And I'm also just going to chop off there. It'll make sense in a minute, so that fits easily around the brooch finding. Don't worry if this does fall apart a bit, you can always patch it back up when it goes in place later. Because the top of my leaf is the turquoise colour, I'm going to use a turquoise coloured bit of aluminium wire, and I'm going to chop more than I need. So probably about 4 or 5 inches, so about 10, 12 centimetres, something like that. And I'm just going to put a little curve in one end, just so that it sits nicely inside the clay. And then if we find our piece, we can figure out roughly where that curve needs to be to go out of the top of the leaf. Just put it in roughly. So we've got our pieces all ready and all set in, but just to make life a little easier for yourself, take your leftover pieces of scrap clay and any other sort of little bits and pieces that you've been working with which you no longer need, and put them through the pasta machine, or roll them thin enough until you've got a piece that's just bigger than this size. And it doesn't need to be particularly thick, so that went through on setting number 5 of my pasta machine, but it's thick enough just so that our pieces will settle in. You'll see exactly what I mean in just a moment. So I'm just going to roughly cut around the shape. And now we can add a little bit of liquid clay to the back of our piece, and you could use PVA glue if you don't have any liquid clay, but liquid clay or Bacon Bond does give you a better fit. And then we'll pull our piece off and sit that roughly where we want it to go. So we've now got a nice piece of soft clay. I'll undo my brooch back. I always check that it works before I put it in place. Yep, that's fine. So I'm going to fit him in place where I want it to go on the back of the brooch, and just push it in enough so it sits into that scrap clay. We can then take our piece of wire that's going to be the stem to the leaf and make sure it goes in, so it's going to come out at a place where the stem should come out on the front of the leaf. Having got those two in place, we can chop away some of this excess scrap clay, because it's only there to help our pieces sit snugly against the back of our brooch. And now we've cut the excess away, we can carefully fit this extra piece around that we created. So it should fit on okay. And then the piece that we took out from the middle, you can chop a bit off the top end, because we've got that part of the mechanism, a bit off the bottom end, and that should fit in the middle. You can match it up with the other colours of the clay. And then you can spend a bit of time just rolling the clay into itself and into that scrap clay we've added underneath. Go nicely down to the edges. Roll it over any scrap clay underneath to hide the scrap clay. Take a bit of time just putting it all in around the mechanism, getting it nice and flat but making sure the mechanism still works. We'll be chopping off any excess later. Once you've got that all relatively smooth, you can go back to our gold and our pearl clay, and we can add in the gold line from one side to the other with a little pearl over the top, and it should marry in the pieces, and then we'll cut some extra pieces of our cane and put those in as well. So I finished by texturing it with the sponge, and as you can see, that helps all the fittings sort of hide back and fade back into the background. Not perfect, but considering you're not going to be seeing that bit much, it's not a bad finished effect. So bake as always according to the manufacturer's instructions on a tile tinted with aluminium foil. I will always put the back of the pin down to create that groove, but I won't bake it closed because that'll force the fastening back up through the clay, and leave this piece again until after it's been baked. You can see that I cut off any excess, so from the front you can't see any of the findings on the back. And in the same way as we did beforehand, you can use the card the other way up just to support your piece whilst it bakes. When the brooch is cooled, the last decision to make is whether or not you want to add any paint detail just to bring out the veins and perhaps to add around the edge. If I'm going to do this, I normally do it before I curl and finish off the wire, because that effectively gives me a handle to hold on to when I'm doing the paint. And very simply, I just put some acrylic paint onto a little sheet of paper, and with quite a small brush, because I'm going to make sure I get it really pushed into all those areas where it needs to fit into the veins, push it all in, and then immediately rub it off with something like a biodegradable wet wipe or a wet tissue. And then once that's all done, I will just very simply just go around the very edge and add a little gold acrylic paint. So as I say, completely up to you whether or not you want to do that. If, of course, when you're creating your piece, having put the paint on, you decide you don't like it, then whilst it's still wet, just take it off either with a cloth or a little something like a soft toothbrush just to take the paint out of the veins in the leaf. Last thing to do is just to sort out the stem. It's a little bit longer, the wire, at the moment than I want, so I'll take a little bit off. I normally work on about 3 inches, 7.5 centimetres, so something about there. And having chopped the end, I want to make sure it's nice and smooth, so I'll just use some sandpaper just to smooth it off. And you want it so that when you run your finger over it, there's no feeling of sharpness anywhere. And then just decide which way you want your leaf to curl and how it wants to go. I think I'm going to do the curl upwards. So with my round nose pliers, I'm just going to create a nice tight curve right on the inside and then pull out slightly and have it going away into a bigger curl, and then perhaps have it curl away to start with and then curl back up. And you can create whatever shape you want, and because it's aluminium wire, it's nice and easy to bend. So there is our brooch and pendant completed. And as I say, that was the most complicated one because of the backing we filled in on it. And the pendant and the earrings are very easy to make by comparison. So I'll just run you through how to create those. Here's our piece for our pendant. Now for this one, I've done equal decoration on the front as I have for the back. And also for this one, we can put the leaf texture on the back as well if you wish, or you can do the sponge effect, same as we did last time, completely up to you. For this one, same again, front side, put him down so he's at the point where that's going to be. I move it over so that's the point where I want the piece to come out, and then very carefully moving my fingers away, making sure he's in place. I'm going to take the top texture, and all I'm thinking about with this one is where that line's going to go. So looking at it, I'm going to line it up so that line's going to join in there and come out at the same point at the end. Bring him up a little bit more. Press down, and this time just press down with your fingers. I'm concentrating on the edges in particular to make sure I've got some nice thinnish edges. And then hopefully when we pull up, we've got that line nicely down where we want it to go, so it comes out of the point. And with this one, because it's the pendant and we don't need a flat back, we're just going to add a hanging place, and where the stalk's coming out, we can actually have a bit of fun with this one and actually sort of add some curves and some shapes into the sides of our leaf. So that's where the stalk's going to come out, and as before, I've just got a couple of curved pieces of card, and then we will just lay that on, make them as curved as you want them to give it a little bit of extra support. So curve that one, a little bit of extra curve under there, and exactly the same as before, because we're going to add the details on the back once this one's been baked first. So again, I'll put that one on a tile, tent the whole thing in aluminium foil, and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. I need to create 2 little additional decorative pieces to put on the back of our pendant, so I've just taken, hand cut, some ovals from our turquoise mixture, hand chopped just by going down the side, some little leaf shapes around the outside, added a little bit of gold and a couple of dots of our bullseye cane, put that through the texture sheet, one side only, so no decoration on the back. And that gives me a nice shape and size for adding our pieces to the back of the pendant, and I say I'll need 2 of those. Once your pendant piece is cooled from the oven, we can add the stem to the leaf. So this one I've chosen for a piece of green aluminium wire, slightly less length to this one. We don't need so much because obviously this one can sit right at the top. So this is probably about 3.5, 4 inches, about sort of 9-10 centimetres, something like that. So again, a little bit of scrap clay. A little bit of liquid clay or PVA glue, just on the back where the stem would go. And that gives us something nice and soft just to press the wire into to make sure it's nicely in place. Check on the front to make sure it's not poking out, and then with one of our pieces, one of our decorative leaves, just gently press that into place over the top, and again chop off any excess. And then think about how you want it to hang. So I'm going to want mine to hang probably from coming over this side, so it goes slightly off at an angle. So therefore my piece, my little leaf, needs to go in just over there. So again, a little bit of liquid clay, top and bottom, and then curling it around something like the cable needle, just to create enough of a groove that's going to give me somewhere to put a chain or a piece of cord. I can just sit that piece in there, just press it very lightly down. Have a look, check that I've got enough space, put a chain or a cord through, and as before, trim off any excess so it doesn't show from the front. And then what I will sometimes do is just get a cocktail stick just to put it in place so that I can have a quick look to check that it's going to hang properly when it's in place. Once you're happy with how the piece looks, again it can just sit on some upturned of your curved card pieces on a tile, whole thing as always aluminium foil and baked according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. I finished off the pendant with the gold paint on both the front and the sides and just curled the stem, and then that hangs at an angle with the stem going off to one side, and that is the leaf pendant completed. For our earrings, I've done exactly the same as we did for the big pieces. I've made myself a small template, cut out the 3 pieces as before and put them together, and I've decorated the front and the back. I've done the double texture, so with the leaf and then this piece on top, so we've got the nice line going through. And then for these pieces, we can actually add the backing at the same time as we bake them, rather than bake them first and add it separately. As we've got the gold detail, I've chosen some gold wire, and this is jewellery wire, and this is 0.8mm in width, and I'll put the gauge in the details below. Round nose pliers. All I'm going to do is create a very small little hoop in each piece. And of course you can actually buy pieces which have got the loops on the end if you want first. I've got the little round dots that we made, the bullseye cane, and I've got one of the pieces that we hadn't done quite so small, so I'm just going to take myself 2 slices that are bigger than the size of the loops that we've made to go around our earrings. So I've made them relatively chunky because we want to be able to sort of hold the wire in place nicely, and then because it's unbaked clay, I'm just going to dip the tip of our piece into somewhat liquid clay, add that on there and press it in, and then just add that round the back and the top where the stalk would come out of our earring. Just pressing in gently so as not to distort the earring or the texture, but enough that it will hold in place during baking. And that's all we need to create the finding, and the fact it's sticking out at a wrong angle now, we can change that once it's been baked. And as before, a piece of curved card, and we'll just sit that on the curved card whilst it bakes, and I will repeat the other one. And the last thing I'll do before I bake them is I'll make sure that if I've put any curves on the bottom that I've done the same going the opposite direction for either piece. And again, bake them according to the manufacturer's instructions on a tile tented in aluminium foil, and say for the manufacturer's instructions for the amount of time and temperature that they recommend. When the earrings have cooled, after finishing baking, I will just pop a little glass bead on, cut off the excess, and I usually do the width of my finger because that's what I'm used to, and that for me I find is a good width. With the round nose pliers, bend the wire down at 90 degrees, and then you can curve it back round and the wire should fit down into the glass bead. And that will give you a nice secure fitting to hang your ear wires from. Repeat for the other side. Open up the bottom of the fish hook earring wires, and then you can just pop them on. And there you have your pair of finished earrings. I decided to do the gold paint on the earrings as well. Now normally if I was doing those I would do that before I cut off the wire and added the ear pieces, but you can, as you can see, also do them afterwards. So that they are finished with a little bit of gold around the outside. Here's another colour combination for you. So this one I did pearl green, pearl blue, and then a copper or bronze. This one I did with the green, so that's the one that's got the brooch in. That's the one that was finished with the two little leaf details, and then as before these ones have just got the round on the back to hold them for the earrings, and they were finished with gold paint again. Another colour combination, this was done with blue, the peach, and then the lime green with bronze detailing, bronze paint on that one, and this one was done with black, green and copper, and then there's gold and bronze detail, and again bronze paint around the outside. So lots of different colour variations depending on what season it is, what colours you want to do. You can just have fun and experiment. And there are our finished pieces, and as you can see I did the different colour variations in different places on the leaf, so you could see how they're all going to come out, whether it's a pendant, a brooch, earrings, or all three. So that's it, that's the end of that tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed that one. As I say, inspired by pictures I saw on social media, and I just wanted to give it a go in polymer clay. So many different things you can do with this one, so many different variations, and I really look forward to seeing the pieces that you create. Don't forget to tag me if you post a thing online. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that, and a special thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you next time and we can have some more polymer clay fun. Bye for now. Bye.